gotten to know a lot of our students and their writing abilities, and have developed over time different methods to give feedback that I'm happy to share with everybody.
And here's a fun fact. We were hired on the exact same day.
Yes, we were.
Yes, we were.
I found I'm looking at it right now, our newsletter that goes out with the English department, and both of our names are on there together.
Oh, awesome.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So today we're going to talk about assessing high stakes writing because we're getting, near that time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just share a little PowerPoint that I made with all of you. Can you guys see that?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about rubrics, how we grade through Microsoft Word, maybe some best practices for leaving comments and assessing student papers, using one of our tools that we have through Turnitin and through Brightspace, which is called GradeMark. And then hopefully we'll have some time for discussion, and we can just, one of the most useful things I get out of these workshops when I attend is just hearing the great ideas from other people and what they're doing. So hopefully we can have some time for that at the end. So what we wanted to do first was just kind of get an idea of how you currently assess your writing. And what I mean by that is maybe like what tools you use, what approaches you use. Do you have your students print out their papers? Just kind of getting a sense of where we're all at. Would anyone like to share? Just unmute yourself and speak because I can't see some of us.
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Okay, because I'm brave enough to start. And at my age, you don't care what people think. Okay. So one of the things I do is I do have a rubric that I use. Okay. And I try to make sure that everybody understands that rubric, because I usually find out that students really don't pay attention to a rubric until after they get their papers back checked using that rubric. The other thing that I do is I do sometimes have them pick a certain segment of somebody else's writing. All right. And point out the strong points and see where that would fit in the rubric. And one of the things that I do that I really like is I ask them what they would add to the rubric. And I ask them to evaluate the rubric that I've used. What do they find more confusing? What do I have to explain thoroughly? And sometimes when we share papers, I tell them not to use the complete rubric, but to take, like, my rubric's divided into sections. So I sometimes have more items than I probably should have. And I might say to them, pick 3 rubrics that you would, 3 items in a rubric. And that's what I have them check or comment on their peers' paper with. Okay. So they don't use everything, but I find that they use the things that they feel really strong in, and it gets them familiar with at least manipulating the rubric. Okay.
Dale,
So
why don't you tell everyone, in case people are unfamiliar with your position here, like, why don't you tell everyone the experience that you have in this area?
Say that again.
Why don't you share with everyone how long you've been teaching and the experience you have in this area?
I tell my students this, and when I say it, I wait a couple of seconds to respond. Well, I've been at the university maybe between 15 and 17 years now, but I've been teaching and praying at the same time for 52 years. Okay. And when I tell my students that, I give them a couple of seconds. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds. 1, 2, 3, there you are. And if they don't answer right away, I say, wow, you just missed an opportunity to get an A. Okay. So, but I have to tell you that I really learned so much just by working with my colleagues. Okay. And you think, because there is so much to continue to learn.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get any easier, gang. I just thought I'd give you a little heads up on that. Does that fit, Amy?
Yeah, thank you, Dale. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Would anyone else like to share how they're assessing papers at this point, or high stakes writing?
Yeah, I'll briefly, I'm sorry, I'm having to eat lunch at the same time, so I didn't want you to have to watch that. So I'm in English literature. So I have like basically everything submitted through Brightspace now. and I use GradeMark. I've been doing that for like 1.5 semesters. Well, 2 now, I guess. And I've got it to the point where I use I think of it as a rubric, but they call it like a grading form or something with certain categories. And so I don't put like written feedback in the rubric anymore. I did that for a while, but it got to be sort of redundant. So I have scoring in different parts of the rubric as kind of like a check on myself to be like, I was saying this to Bianca, like I can pretty much at this point look at an essay and think that's probably B-. But I want to be able to go through in the rubric and be like, okay, yeah, the points are reflecting what I think they're, or sometimes it'll be like, this is a higher score than I thought based on the numbers. What is it about how I assess this that shows that? And then I do line feedback in GradeMark using a lot of the like custom tags. So I've I was saying to Bianca, like it's a lot of work on the front end, but it saves you a lot of time later.
I agree. And I'm
Sorry.
glad that you're using it, Madeline. And hopefully when I'm going over it, because I'm not great with it, you might chime in if I need your help.
Maybe. Yeah. And in conjunction with that, I also have like a document that I've made of like common errors that I see or like issues that come up. And so like it's actually nice for kind of a shorthand in the custom tags. I can put like, see this document page, whatever, so they can get more. So like, there's a lot of moving parts that hopefully collectively contribute, but I would still like to be spending less time on this. So I'm hoping maybe today we can talk about strategies about what's actually useful to them.
Good, fantastic. Okay, so speaking of time, let's go forward here in our PowerPoint. So Peter Elbow describes high stakes writing as demonstrated learning. He goes on to say that the stakes are high for both the instructor and the student. And I love this quote of his. He says, "We cannot give fair course grades unless we get a valid sense of how much students have learned and understood. For this, we need high stakes writing. The stakes are high because it needs to be good and it bears directly on the course grade. But some instructors are not trained to teach writing and will understandably feel some apprehension about high stakes writing, especially about devising topics, commenting, and grading." So the stakes are high for teachers as well as students. And I know this is one of the things that intimidated me most when I was coming into the classroom was how would I leave feedback that students would value and take away and not just ignore like I see my girls do. I have 15-year-old twins and they do this all the time, like whatever. I'll ask them, why did you get a C on that paper? And they can't tell me because they don't know. So one of the tools we can use, and we've mentioned it a little bit, is a rubric or a grid. So in their high stakes ambiguity, regular grades invite controversy and animosity and often make students feel helpless. Grids can come to the rescue here. This is also from Peter Elbow. A grid asks us to give multiple grades on a paper, but makes a non-onerous task because each grade needs only 3 levels of quality: strong, satisfactory, or weak, or 4 if you want, which would be excellent, good, fair, and poor. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with Bianca, who's our rubric expert. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Bianca, so you can kind of guide us from here, okay?
Sure. So in the first year grading program, rubrics aren't necessarily our first choice to use for high stakes assignments. But what I have found and what we have found is I think that they could be a great tool, especially if you have a lot of students at once in the classroom. Like I remember before I was full-time, I was teaching at 3 different schools and I had like 7 classes I was teaching. So I was like, how do I give students valuable feedback, but also do it in a way that doesn't take forever and that I'm not up till 2 and 3 a.m. grading papers. So for me, for a little while, at least when I had a lot of students, rubrics were the answer. So a couple of things here. So rubrics often help instructors to assess assignments consistently from student to student so that students don't feel like we're judging them unfairly or differently based upon if we like them or not. Another one is it saves, of course, time in grading for both short and long term. This is because often I think we probably all find ourselves giving similar types of feedback repetitively if there's like a certain area where we know that students often make the mistakes over and over again. We don't have to constantly be repeating ourselves on a paper and giving the same comments over and over. So a rubric can help that. It helps of course, timely, effective feedback, so we can give our students the feedback in time for them to figure out what they need to work on for the next paper before they start working on that next paper, which also, of course, helps promote student learning in a sustainable way. It also, like Dale said, really helps clarify expectations and components of assignments for both students and course teaching assistants. So I thought it was really interesting, Dale, when you talked about actually giving the students the rubric to help when they do a peer review, like grade each other with a rubric. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
It takes a little bit of courage.
Yeah, and I know what I think, giving the students the rubric before an assignment, one of the things that helps students do is to say, okay, here is what is expected of me in a formalized way, because when they are in a classroom and there's that formality aspect, they want to know, how can I be formal? And this is a great way to teach them formality.
And can I add one thing, Bianca, just for a minute? You know what else a rubric does? It's a great teaching tool. For example, I want my students to show all their work, but of course that sometimes is like asking God to teach class for a day. And so I actually put a point value on the work that they hand in, like all of the steps of the writing process. Originally it's worth 30 points. Well, I get students who don't hand in that work until they see that they've lost a certain number of points for that. It kind of like makes items that I request more important, because there's some type of a recognition or value that I've given it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great way to get students to see writing as, many components that they have to learn and then demonstrate that learning. And that, we're talking about in my Writing 210 class, that writing is really a mode of learning, and with all the different components that, of course, comp theory theorist Janet Emig talks about. But anyhow, yes, thank you very much, Dale. I think that's interesting and really important to think about with rubrics. Let's see, underneath that, so obviously it helps students understand expectations and components of an assignment, be more aware of their learning process and progress, and improve the work through time, of course, that timely and detailed feedback then. So on the next slide.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
No, oh, you're fine.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to turn it over to you, Bianca. I'll let you share your screen.
Okay, sure.
Because you're going to open up your rubrics for everybody.
Yes. Okay. So let me share. Okay. Just move this down. Okay. Oh, let's see. There we go. Okay, so there are two types of rubrics that could be helpful or effective when it comes to assessing student work. The first type is analytical, the second is holistic. And analytical rubrics are really multi-criteria rubric, categorizing assessment material and addressing them comprehensively. So I wanted to show you guys an example of what that would look like. Can you all see the screen, the rubric that's up?
Yeah.
So this is an example of a rubric that I actually created for my Writing 107 students when I had a lot of students, and I wanted to develop a rubric that did all the things that I talked about a rubric should do, which is all the areas of grading that I find are important that I grade for anyway, to let them know what it is, and then put that into the A, B, C, D, F range. So that I would go through and circle them, and each category, it was out of 200 points altogether. And I made sure to put everything was out of 20 points, except for the discussion or commentary on source material as being weighted more, because that was the more important thing I wanted them to do. So it's a good opportunity in the areas of grading in this type of rubric to show what the emphasis could or should be on, so that they know exactly where they should be putting their efforts into. And I asked myself, what does an A range, B range, C range paper look like? And so obviously you can see I have thesis and introduction and what that looks like, the information presented and gathered. So all these really important things that we talk about when it comes to writing, introducing sources, citing sources, the flow, conclusion, grammar mechanics. So what I did is that I thought about, and this was really important to me, that I thought about the language that I used with my students to then repeat that similar language that would be specified to my specific group of students, so that we felt like we had a community where, we spoke each other's language, that we all had the same vocabulary, that we were working toward the same goals. So I found the more specific I was in the language that I used with them, the more that they understood what they were supposed to be doing. So like qualifying sources might sound unfamiliar to some people, right? So, but my students knew that what that vocab was, they picked it up, we did a lesson about that. So they were able to go back and look at that information before they were to hand the paper in, to make sure they were hitting those criteria of what I wanted them to do when I said qualifying sources. So they got this before they had the assignment, and they were able to see if they wanted an A, what they had to do. So I found this to be extremely useful because I was making these kinds of comments on their papers anyway. So I was like, why don't I just make this list of what it will look like to get an A, B, C, D, so I don't have to write it on every single portion that, I need to make this comment on. So it was a faster way for me to give them the same feedback, almost the same feedback that I would have if I were grading it and just putting comments in the margins. So this is does anyone have questions on the analytical rubric here? This was on a persuasive paper.
Bianca, can I ask a quick question just
Yeah,
to
of course.
clarify?
Sure.
So because I'm terrible at math, go over what this would look like in terms of numbers. So
Sure.
if a student under the thesis intro category,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
scored in the A range from what you and I
Yes.
discussed, that would earn them 20 points.
Right. So if I got this and I highlighted it and I was like, the thesis here, intro, great, falls under the A range, I highlight it and I give that 20 points. Or if it was, let's say the information gathered and presented, they used good sources, meeting most of the requirements, right? It's good, it's here, I highlight here, and I know that this would really be like 15 points. Okay. So then they would get 20, 15, then I would go, the same, and they would understand more. So this was more of a general one. I did have points like associated, but so anyone could use whichever point range that works in their system. And Madeline, did you have a question?
Yeah, so do you do increments of 5? Because that's what I do, because that tends to work out in like 150 or 200. It tends to sort out like to the A, B, like they tend to sort of well to the brackets, like categories when you're grading, yes, which is nice.
Yeah, so I think,
and also like I feel like if I did like a 98 versus 99, then I'd be quibbling over like 1 point. Whereas if it's like 5 at a time, then I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the increments of 5, Madeline, make the most sense. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. I'd have to actually look. I haven't used this in a little while, but that I think makes the most sense. Numbers wise, I'm not a math person, so it's easier for me to do increments of 5. But yes, so basically it would be in this range, and the only point difference that was different than the rest would be like a double section, which was that discussion commentary thing. So that's generally then how I would go about it, and then I would add it up at the end, and it would be a score, like out of 180 out of 200 or something like that. So, and then they know what they add up their scores at the end of the semester.
And let me just add too, like this is so deeply organized, and because what we're teaching is the skill of writing, so that's why there are so many categories, right? Yeah, but if I were teaching biology or something and I had a writing piece that I had to grade, these categories would look very different. Obviously, grammar and mechanics might be one, organization might be one, but then the rest would probably be content related, right? Or just specific to the mode of whatever the biology report would be.
Exactly. And what's great about this is to look at it to say, okay, what am I valuing the most? What do I want my students to get out of this? And then, making the categories very specific to each of the assignments that everybody gives to their students here. And like I said before, to use that language that the class is going to understand, that makes it inclusive for them. So that is what I wanted to emphasize here for this. And you could anyone, if you wanted to, could take this and adapt it to their course if it fits the requirements for the paper, for your papers. Any other questions on this? Okay, so at high stakes assignments, when I know I have to give a lot of feedback, this is something I might do with a lot of categories so that I could make sure each one of them that I'm showing the importance of, that I want them to do all of these things and not just like a couple things that are really good. So that is the analytical rubric. The holistic rubric is a little different. So it's a single criteria rubric used typically to assess a writing assignment based on a set of accepted achievements. And here's an example that I wanted to show you of how to create one. So you guys can take this and go with it. So basically it's going back to Peter Elbow's work, where it's those 4 criteria of strong, acceptable, unacceptable, and then significantly weak, or language that would fit you and your course. And you would give it a score based upon that. And it's a group of things under each one, and they would get the score under each one of these. So there's a lot of things to focus on here. So this is a resource that you guys can take and look at. But to make it a little bit clearer for you to see over here. So this is a sample holistic rubric where they would get a score of, like, for example, the 4-3-1-2, and the criteria would be over here. For example, research paper demonstrates complete understanding and execution of the assigned objectives. And then going to 3, it demonstrates considerable understanding and execution, followed by some understanding and then limited understanding. So to score it the 4-3-2-1 with more criteria under that number is just a different way to use a rubric if it's not so many, specific things that you're analyzing, as in the analytical rubric.
And you can use this, the way that I use this, I'm a holistic rubric user, shocker.
Yeah.
The way that I use it is I kind of combine the two, where I do an A paper has these qualifications. And like Dale said, I have my students fill that in with me. So we'll go through and decide what an A paper looks like, a B paper looks like, and a C paper looks like. And then they know if I choose, the middle column, that this is a B paper, that I have leeway to go B+ or B- based on what they have. So you can also kind of think of it that way, like an A range exhibits these qualities, a B range exhibits these qualities, and then just kind of take it from there. Does that match with what you're saying, Bianca?
Exactly. That's what sometimes I will put at actually the end of an assignment sheet sometimes, even if it's not like I check off these boxes or whatever with the rubric. I usually put, here's what an A paper looks like, a B, a C, and then below that, and it looks very similar to this. So I do the exact same thing, and that is usually also helpful for me as well. And it looks like there's something in the chat. Okay, so Madeline says she uses a hybrid of the two for her literature essays. One description for the criteria. So 7 categories with different points. So this is interesting too. So just different, no, you're fine, Madeline. So I think I like that too, because as you can see, if you guys can see in the chat, if you look at that, Madeline puts different criteria that are, similar to what I had, but also different and more specific to her assignment. So adherence to prompt, thesis, main argument, strength of arguments, supporting evidence, and they all have different values. So this is a good way, these rubrics and creating it in these ways could be a good idea to let our students know what we value and what we expect them, the level that we expect them to work toward.
And what I find interesting is as we're having this conversation, you'll notice that mechanics and grammar bear a small weight of the
Yes.
grading process. Yet I
Yes.
think when I first began teaching, I thought I had to grade every single, like mark every single mistake
Me too.
because they had to be grammatic. And then one of my writing teachers said to me, you know, like even Stephen King has an editor. Like not everybody just knows how to write flawlessly. So I think, you know, the way that I get around that in my classroom is just by talking about different resources students can use to help build their grammar and mechanics and encouraging them to use them, like the writing center. There you go. We got there.
Yes, absolutely. I always tell my students go to the writing center. Absolutely. Yeah. The grammar mechanics, we call them, right? The lower order concerns.
Yep.
The higher order concerns in writing are typically more important in writing classes, but in every other class, probably, right? The research, discussing the research, organizing the information. So the higher stakes writing are portions of writing are what we like to talk about. Okay. So Patty says, Amy, great point. Thank you for sharing in the chat there. Okay, so I wanted to show these two for the rubrics. So and then let me see really quick. So I think Amy, do you want me to swing it back to you?
Yep. Okay. Okay. So we are here. Okay, present. Okay, so there are a couple places on the web where you can find some assistance for rubrics. Rubistar is one of them, and we can make this PowerPoint shareable with everybody after the presentation because all of these links are clickable and will take you there. So Rubistar is a great site that a lot of K through 12 teachers use, but certainly you can use it in higher education as well. And there's a lot of already pre-made rubrics according to subject on there. So it's really helpful. The American Association of Colleges and Universities has rubrics available that are already pre-made. You can create your own using Brightspace, which we'll talk about in a minute. Or the best rubrics that I have come across is asking a colleague or respected association for rubrics. So, you know, I think I have a copy of Billy's rubric. I think I have Bonnie's rubric. I have Teresa's. I have everybody's rubric. So I think that, you know, just kind of reaching out and asking someone who's taught the course before or teaches a similar course, how they would handle it and then tweaking it to your own course is a good idea. So we want to talk a little bit about grading and commenting through Microsoft Word or GradeMark. One of the reasons, like I just said, that I wanted to have this workshop was because I was talking with a colleague of mine who's not a writing teacher, and this person expressed that they really felt overwhelmed by grading papers because they did feel they had to mark every single thing. So I wanted to just kind of go over some of the practices that we use. So Bianca, I think you're going to do some Microsoft Word grading, right? But let's talk about Bloom first, of course. All right. So in his earliest descriptions of mastery learning, Bloom was very clear that students should receive only one of two grades on formative assessments, mastery or not mastery. And when pressed about what he meant by mastery, Bloom recognized that any answer he offered was sure to draw criticism. So rather than press teachers to define mastery anew, he simply asked teachers, tell me what you expect of students to receive the grade of A. And that level of performance then becomes the mastery expectation for all. And it is important to say that Bloom believed the grade of not mastery should always be framed as temporary. So of course, you know, when we're handing back papers, each instructor does this differently. I know in my class, if a student earns a C or below, if they're willing to revise it with the help of the Writing Center, then I will regrade that paper for up to a whole letter grade higher. So, you know, I try to really practice that not mastery is is fluid in my class and is temporary. So again, when grammar and punctuation are poorly done, many instructors feel compelled to make corrections, but this is a losing game. So I just have some comments here that I pulled off of a writing center session that one of my consultants was having with a student. So for example, if you have a paper and there's a reoccurring error, you can say something like, each paragraph needs a topic sentence, one that governs every sentence after. Please use Writing Center for working on this, or please go through your paper and find where this is. So it's kind of the scaffolding method, which is we do, I do, we do, you do. So I'm showing you and highlighting where your organization is off. If you can, please go through the rest of the paper and look for that. So you're kind of guiding them to where the reoccurring errors are and not marking every single one. When introducing a quote, please refer to the ICE method that we discussed in class. And in GradeMark, you can actually link your class material to your comments. And in Microsoft Word, you could do that too, right, Bianca? You could insert a link if you wanted to a resource on the web, right?
Yes.
And then, you know, something like your comma use is erratic, please visit the Writing Center or OWL at Purdue for guidance here. So just kind of letting the student know there's a problem, what the problem is, and where they can find the resources to fix it is kind of the practice that I use. And some more guidance here is always begin with the positive. I always go through and make sure I have at least 2 or 3 positive quotes on every paper. I admit, you know, sometimes I get away from that and I have to go back and be like, okay, you know, this was a great idea. Offer specific guidance and direction. You want to be very specific about what's wrong. So instead of just saying, you know, this needs a topic sentence, you have to kind of elaborate what does a topic sentence do for a paragraph and why is it important?
Yeah.
Identify the specific aspects of students' performance that need to improve and express confidence in students' highest ability to achieve at the highest level. So like, for example, I had a student this semester who just had a really good, strong sense of voice. He knew what he wanted to say. He said it strongly. He had really good examples for backing it up, but his grammar mechanics, his voice was getting lost in that. So the note that I was leaving him at the end of the paper was, you know, if you could find a way to take control of the grammar mechanics, either by finding an editor, going to the Writing Center in some way, you have a really strong voice here that can come through if we let it. So I kind of couched that criticism in something positive. And I think he was receptive because he came up to me after class and asked me about it. So that's a sign that I think he was pretty receptive to it. All right, so Bianca, I'm going to switch over to you and you're going to show us some Microsoft Word stuff very quickly, right?
Yes.
Does anyone use Microsoft Word to grade papers? Yeah, some of you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I up until probably about 5 years ago, I was handwriting all my commentary, and I would bring stacks of paper home, and it got to the point where my shoulder was actually hurting because of all like the papers I would be putting in my bags. And I was like, I don't really want to, but I think I should probably move to a digital system of grading just for my own, my shoulder health. And I found that once I did that, the grading moved much faster, and for many different reasons. So on Microsoft Word, so obviously this is a sample paper from one of my classes. And I wanted to show you a couple ways to use Microsoft Word that I think is important. So if you do use Microsoft Word, one of the things that I use is, let me move this here, is track changes. Have any of you guys used track changes before in Microsoft Word? Let's use that so you kind of know what that is. Okay. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. It's helpful if students actually open the paper that you send them back to look at them. And when you do it, someone in the chat, use it for this. Yeah, usually works pretty well. So when I do it for this, I go up, obviously, I have these Zoom bars in my way here. I go up to review, and then there's the track changes button, and you could actually do it just for yours or for everybody. There's also the function where you can do all markup, simple markup, no markup in the original. So sometimes when I'm editing actually for something different, I do some outside editing, I will make all my comments, and it's usually the screen is like all red with all my comments. And if I click no markup, it will actually take away everything. It saves the changes that you've made on track changes, but it just takes away all of the extra other stuff on the side. And then you can go back to all markup and everything comes back. So you can view it in two different screens, which I find to be helpful when I'm editing. So when I make comments for a student, obviously you can see here, I have comments here. And when I make a comment, obviously you highlight and you can right click or middle click if you have a Mac, and then you can go to new comment, right? So then you could leave, another comment on the side. Oftentimes there's two different things I do for this. Instead of adding the comment that way, if you have a Mac, I'm not sure how to do it on a PC, but if you have a Mac and you hit Option Command and hold down the letter A, it will make a new comment for you. So like I go through my paper and I could just go bing, 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 and add new comments like up and down, and it goes really quickly if I could do that. So that's like one little tip for you to add quick comments. Another thing that I do, which is an accessibility thing, is you can on a Mac, and I think other computers, I don't know how on a PC, but you could do voice to text. So if I'm leaving commentary, there have been times before where I'm like, I just don't feel like typing. So I will add my voice and speak to the computer. So you can actually do this. And I could share these steps with you. On a Mac, you go to the Apple menu, System Preferences, and then Keyboard. I could share that with you.
I think that's in here somewhere. It's in under Tools or something, I think, because I've used it before.
Oh, okay.
So we can add that information though when we send out the link to the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yep, we can add that. So once you enable diction, it's on a Mac, it's the FN, right, function button. If you double click that, I can talk to my computer and then it adds the words as I go. And sometimes that's really helpful when I have a lot to say and I know what I want to say, but my brain's working faster than my fingers.
Or when you have arthritis.
I just done. And now there's commentary on the screen and I just did it a lot faster than if I typed it. So that's one way to more quickly give feedback. Like if you're me and your brain works faster than your fingers sometimes. So those are two things that I usually do. I also do the track changes so that when I, let's go back and actually hit the tracking changes. So when I take things out and I delete it, I can just get rid of it and it will tell the student over here, if there's something that is actually deleted, it tells the student what it is so that when they go back to it and they right click, they can accept the change and then they could make that change on their version of their paper, or they could say, nope, I actually really wanted to add that, I reject it. So they could actually reject that change if they don't like your feedback. I don't know why they would do that, but maybe creatively they might not agree with something, I suppose. But so track changes and then adding marginal comments are really important. And as you can see, some of the comments that I left, it's not like so many comments that it looks like to the student, oh my God, how am I going to handle this? Because that's another thing I think it's important to be aware of, like we had been talking about. If we give the students too much to digest, they're going to be too full to be able to actually have dessert, so to speak, right? They're not going to be able to take that and use that criticism constructively. They might be too overwhelmed. They're going to maybe look at that and say, oh my God, it's too much. Like I'm stupid or something. So obviously we don't want the students to think that. So focusing my commentary at the end on really important specific things that they're doing either well or that they need work in are that's what I've been working on too. Because I've had, like Amy said, right in the beginning when I started teaching, I could, like the track changes, I would be making so many editing changes, the student would get it back and they'd be overwhelmed. So when I find papers that are really grammatically difficult to get through, what I normally would do, let's say, for example, that this intro was really difficult to get through grammatically, I would fix and change anything I found in the intro. And then I would stop and I would leave a comment over on the side and say, this intro, however I would say, this intro needs a lot of work in grammar, sentence structure, punctuation. It's having some issues. Here's a link for the OWL at Purdue. View this to go see some of these grammar rules. And go to the Writing Center, maybe Professor Archer's information, here it is. And going forward, then in the paper, I'm not going to make any more grammatical changes. So I would stop it wherever I felt it was enough to edit and help them, but then not over help them. So for me, that has always been really helpful to give them a limited amount of that grammatical feedback. And as you can see, scrolling down here at the end, here's just a sample of feedback that I gave a student, going back to what Amy said before is, so I see there, I started with the positive, right? You have some big improvements here compared to the last paper. Nice job. Overall, your strengths include this, this, and this. And then here are some areas to work on. And at the end, I reinforce the good work overall, meeting the goals for the assignment and the student learning outcomes. I can see the hard work you've been putting in. And in the middle is where I gave the critiques on things that they could work on. So I have found that including those different things and a note at the end with some marginal comments with specific areas that I usually refer them to when I talk in the end here, that the students are able to get that and then work from that to really create some positive changes without feeling overwhelmed.
And I'm going to jump in here for 1 second.
Yeah.
I want to say, Bianca, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say in our first year writing chat that we have going on constantly.
Yeah.
I think it was Bonnie Markowski who said that she, in case you still feel kind of icky about leaving this little of feedback, she always writes a note and says, I'm happy to sit down with you and provide more feedback if you'd like to make an appointment with me. So you can always do something like that. 99 out of 100 students are not going to make that appointment, but for the one who will, I think, hey, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had students do that similar thing where they're like, I don't understand how I got a C. And I'd be like, well, why don't you come in? Let's talk about it. So I realized that they never opened it to look at my comments. So I find too that when a student wants to even just like disagree with what I have, because I've made all the, the specific commentary, I'm able to kind of keep track of my own work with them so that I could say, here's what here's why, here's the criteria, here's what you didn't meet. So it documents that nicely.
Okay.
So does anyone have questions on the Microsoft Word stuff here?
Yeah, if you have questions, just unmute and ask because we can't really see everybody.
Amy and Bianca, this is Mary Jane. I just wanted to follow up with what you were saying about feeling bad about not giving enough commentary. I've been using Brightspace to grade now 5 years. And it seems to be that it's always around a third, it looks like, of students that just don't read the comments. And so I think sometimes, we just assume that they're all sitting there waiting for our expert commentary. And, and I think that it would be interesting. I'm guessing the same is true of when there's written commentary given, that some students just don't read it. And so I think it's just important for us to realize that, and think about our own time and energy investment.
Yes.
That's a really good point. One thing you could do, I personally have never done this, but I got the idea from somewhere, is use some low stakes writing to kind of fill that in. So like maybe asking the students for homework that night in a journal entry to pick one comment that you left on their paper and write about it, like how they feel about getting that comment or what they think it means or how they can improve that aspect of it going forward. So that way you're kind of using the tool of reflection without it being a high stakes assessment. I think I heard that once and I thought it was a really good way to encourage them to actually read it.
That's a great, yeah, I really love that idea. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, I know a few of our instructors use reflection as a tool, and they'll give a paper back and say, in a week, a reflection is due on my commentary that I gave you on the paper, to just do some reflecting on, my commentary. Where are you at? Where do you want to go from here? How could you improve? And there is also the function that we could obviously see what if they read the comments or not. And I tell them, I'm transparent. I'm like, hey, I could see if you read my commentary or not.
I have a, if you don't mind, I have a statement. I'm Rob Carbonell. I'm history department. And as an adjunct, I have one course. I teach modern East Asia or Chinese history. So one of the things I've learned in teaching this area, and to get to that point of why students have or pay attention to a grade, is I put 2 grades on the paper. The first grade is the stronger grade. The second grade is the tendency of where they're going. So, and that helps me, because if it's like a B, B minus, and I write in using usually longhand because I just don't have that many papers to grade, usually up to 20, and that's not all that difficult for me. But it also gives them an idea, and I point out the tendency is you're going down because you're not clear, but you're making strong points, but you're not clear on how you're making them. And that helps me when I go back and assess the other papers that I've made a impression on where I think the student is moving. And that helps me when I come to a final grade. So the 2 grade things, also sometimes students get confused, and that's great because they ask, why do I have 2 grades? And I said, read it, and then they come to a clarity. But that also strengthens their energy level, that they're moving forward and they keep the same projection of writing, or they have to reassess their standard and move. So that's something I learned years ago.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, really interesting. I like that a lot.
And I thought the last point I would say, I thought was in teaching Asian history, where most people have no educational platform of reality that they've had in schools, it's intimidating and daunting. And so it gives them some kind of field work of confidence in that regard. And that seems to have done well at various locations I've taught.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you,
for
Rob.
sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bianca, do you want to throw it back to me for GradeMark?
I do. So I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Okay. So I'm just going to real quickly go high level with GradeMark. If you use GradeMark through Brightspace, or if you don't and you would like more information, just we're going to be sharing a survey at the end of this workshop, and we're asking for comments. Just let us know if you'd like maybe one of our instructional designers like Brian Snap maybe and the 2 of us or whatever to do a workshop specifically just around Dropbox and tying rubrics to it and tying Brightspace to it, because it is quite technical. So we'd be happy to bring somebody in from our instructional design team to do a workshop for that. So I'm just going to kind of go over and again, Madeline, you use this a lot, and Mary Jane, were you saying you use it a lot? Who else uses it?
Yes, I use it a lot and I love it. And I think you should hold a workshop on it, because you can use it for assessment purposes too, because it allows you to get an aggregate look at how the students did in the class overall. And you can tell which areas of the rubric are strongest and weakest.
Right. So if I'm kind of missing something here, just let me know and we can kind of talk about that. I'm just going to go over how I use it. So if you go into your Dropbox, and you have to, when you set up your Dropbox, you have to turn it in on. That's a sentence. So you have to enable turn it in order to use GradeMark. So once that's turned in, you should be able to just click here and it should take you into the GradeMark interface. And here it is. So this is a great tool because it's highly customizable. So if you look, here's your Turnitin score, and here are your GradeMark tools. So we have a set of quick marks that we use. So you have three options here. You can highlight and you can use a quick mark, you can leave a comment, or you can strike it. So you can see, for example, here I left a comment and I was just correcting a word. Here I used a strike. Here I used a quick mark. So for example, if I'm going through and I see, say for example, they had the wrong book number here or something, I could just leave a quick comment and say wrong format or wrong page number, whatever I want to say to them. And you see, I can use a link here, so I can drop a link in there if I want to. If I'm doing the same quick mark over and over and over again, which I found that I do. So for example, do nothing sentence is a quick mark of mine. If I'm doing it, if I'm writing the same sentence over and over and over again, you can convert it to a quick mark and add it to your set. So the way that you would customize this is you just click on this little wheel here and it brings you into the quick marks. So this is the Amy set of quick marks, but there are various kinds. And if you go up here, you can see them. Okay, so 6th to 8th grade, we don't want to worry about that. There's composition, commonly used, punctuation, paraphrasing, narrative expressions, short answer. There's a whole bunch of different ones that are preloaded into Brightspace that you can use. I built my own, but the one that I started with was just composition. So composition has needs, topic, sentence, work on thesis, vague, tense shift, support, just your common errors that you would use. So I did find this very helpful, but I did find that I had to start adding my own. That's why I created a custom. And if you see here, I have, this is the one I use for my literature course, but this is the one I use for writing 107. So they're a little different. So in my literature course, I have, for example, this is something I talk about with my students a lot when it's an expression I use in class, right? You're doing the Oz thing, I call it, like you're showing us behind the curtain. You're saying, I'm writing this paper to show you, blah, 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 where you just need to write the paper. So like, that's something I use a lot in class. So I've made the custom quick mark and I can just click quick mark and select it. And then it's there for the student to see. And you can also add other stuff. So say, for example, I'm using a preloaded quick mark. So I click here and it's repetitive. I can also scroll down and just add my own feedback here to whatever I want that to say. So this is really handy. I use it a lot. Then I scroll down the bottom where Bianca does this on Microsoft Word. I'll do it here where you can just add text. And just click and then it adds all the text down there. You can give it a score here, or you could give it a score back in the Dropbox, which is what I tend to do. Madeline, do you score it here or do you score it in the Dropbox? Is she still on?
I score it. So I use their grading form feature
Right here.
as well. Yeah, so I don't use like the rubric, because I tried to use the rubric and I couldn't figure out how the math worked. Yeah, so I have a grading form and then I have it set up so that there's something you can turn on where the score that you apply in the grading form will then be reflected in Brightspace, and then you just go through and publish all feedback when you're done.
Okay.
So that's really nice.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do a lot of similar stuff to this. Like I have, not at the end, but like at the top, I have like general feedback and then like a list of stuff that's like beyond my basic custom tags.
Right. Okay. So again, if you want a deeper look at this, we can set something up. Just let us know. It's a really handy tool to have. I like it because I'm not downloading a paper and then re-uploading it and saving it onto my computer and doing all this nonsense. Like it's just here. So I have that. And then when you're done, you just close it out. So then what I'll do is go into the actual grading spot and put it here. And I will leave some audio. I record some audio sometimes. And that's mainly, like I said, I was not lying, that I have such bad arthritis in my right hand. It's really killing me. So like I just can't type that much a lot. So I will have, I do use the audio. I use the voice text, Bianca, like you were saying, all the time.
Yes.
And it's just really helpful. Another thing that I wanted to show you really quickly is how you can build a rubric here. So to build a rubric in Brightspace, you would just go to resources and go down to rubric, and you can build two different types of rubrics here. So you would hit new rubric. And one thing that you want to pay attention to is the status. So mine defaulted to published. I think that they all do that, but if you're just kind of working on it, you want to save it into draft. And so you can choose an analytic rubric where you get into putting numbers and everything in all of the columns. This is highly customizable. You can change your criteria here to whatever you want it to be. You can choose your levels. You can get rid of a level and just have 3 levels if you want. You can add feedback that the student will see if they score that particular thing. So say, for example, our criterion 1 was organization and they had no topic sentences. You know, you might say here, like, please refer to the resource on topic sentences for your paper, something like that. Another thing you can do is, as Bianca mentioned when she showed us her rubric, she had 1 or 2 parts, and Madeline yours as well, 1 or 2 parts that were worth more. So you can do custom points where you can make criterion 1 worth more weight than 3, 4, or 5. So I kind of like this. Or you could do no score, you know, just have them see what category. Or there's a holistic kind that you can use where you're just doing excellent, you know, or average, below average, above average, however you want to do it. So there's a holistic way to do that as well. So what that looks like in application is you would go into the paper. First, when you're setting up the Dropbox, you would connect the rubric to it. You would connect the rubric to the Dropbox when you're setting it up. And then when you pull up the paper, this will be here. So you just open it, and as you can see, I'm going through. So I built a rubric that matched what Bianca showed us before. So thesis is A range, B range, C or below C. I could click whatever. Introducing sources, you just go through and you're kind of grading it like this. And then they have a total overall score, which you can change if you want to. It automatically publishes the grade, and then you just hit publish and it's there. And good thing I warned my student ahead of time that she was going to get some weird emails and get some failing grades on some submissions that weren't real. So that's kind of how you use the rubric in Brightspace. And again, if you want like a more detailed technical workshop on that, we'd be happy to do that for you. Okay, Bianca, back to our friendly writing center. So of course, you know, the writing center is here. And one thing I just want to say about the writing center is some ways that you can use the writing center in your classes is kind of what I mentioned before. One of them is to encourage students who might, you know, get a grade that they're not happy with to use the writing center. I caution against using the writing center as some kind of punitive measure. You know, we really want students to feel encouraged to come here. But one thing I do want to say is the approach that my consultants take is the exact approach that Bianca and I are kind of talking about, where they are trained to focus on high order concerns first. So the first thing that my writing center consultants look at when somebody comes in is, what is the adherence to the prompt? Is the student actually writing the paper that the professor wants the student to write? So that's kind of where we start. And then we start with those higher order concerns, which are like thesis and sources and stuff like that. And then they go all the way down to grammar, which is at the very bottom, which is, you know, comma splices, spelling, awkwardness, something like that. A lot of times students have those high order concerns in place already, and we don't need to spend a lot of time there. And they really get a good thorough edit through with grammar, and that's fine. but a lot of times they might need 2 or 3 sessions. So we do encourage you when you're talking about the Writing Center to talk about it kind of as an ongoing process and as a resource that they can use over and over and over again, because that's, you know, we do have some of the best students on campus come here all the time. You know, they're A students, and you know, we like to think there's a correlation, but we're not 100% sure. Okay, so students can visit the Writing Center at any stage of the process. Another way that you can build it into your assignment is to assign a point value to it. I've seen professors do that where it's just a small amount, but maybe 5 points for going to the Writing Center. And you can always reach out to me to ask me if a student has gone to the Writing Center. You could send me your class list and I can just send you a yes or no for everybody, however you would like to do that. Okay. Finally, here's our references. And then here is contact information for Bianca and myself. But we'd also like to open it up and know if you guys have any questions at this point. I think we're at 4 o'clock, right? Yeah, exactly. So, you know, do you guys have anything you'd like to talk about or share? Any good ideas or any questions that you have based on what we talked about today? Nobody? Are we good?
Okay. Yeah, I see the comments that a workshop specifically on GradeMark and rubric creation would be a good idea. And yeah, I think that would be great. We'd love.
We could definitely do that. We'll try to do it early in the fall so that you can put it in place for your fall classes.
Yeah, sounds good. Any questions, comments? Yeah, well, thank you, everybody.
Bianca, could I just say, I'm sorry, I had to take an important call, but I just wanted
Sure.
to encourage everybody on here to think too that rubrics are extremely helpful for assessment purposes. So, you know, you can across all of those rubrics, you can see where the students are falling, and that then helps you to determine if they're meeting a particular learning outcome. So you can use them. They help your grading, but they also help your assessment.
Yeah, they're really helpful for assessing programs. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And I would like to throw a survey link in the chat if you can. Just take 2 or 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be right now. I know some of you have to get to class, but if you can, just quickly fill it out. Let us know if there's something that you want us to cover that we haven't. I think it's pretty clear everyone would like a GradeMark slash, I think just all things around the Dropbox, right? How to tie rubric to it, how to use GradeMark, that kind of stuff. So I could definitely speak with Brian about that.